What's up guys, Joe with Tracker Farms. I'm a habitat specialist with Whitetail Habitat Solutions alongside Jeff Sturgis and the gang. Hope everyone's doing well. Wanted to give you guys a quick example today of some of the more diversity pocket oriented cuttings. If you watched our last video, we did our pines. We spaced out a little over 1,000 pines, everything from bordering some food plots with the switchgrass to also planting some pockets and even some rows in some areas. Even though it's not as natural and ideal, it will make it easier for myself or Mike to go back and mow or spray. And then if we want to remove some trees to make it look a little more natural, we might do that. But thinking long term, and if you've been following along, you know on my property we have a lot of fields, so a lot of space to kind of fill in, and so that's been one of our major goals. So today here you can see I have numerous videos from last year. We have this diversity pocket with the 6 T-posts. It is 30 feet in diameter, which makes it just under 100 feet in circumference. So if you do want to utilize a fence, I did show a little bit last year. Mike can show you this welded wire here on the ground. This is one we need to fix. But being that those are 100-foot rolls, we know that this will just perfectly basically cover this 30-foot circle. All right. You want to get those at least probably 6 feet off the ground as far as the welded wire, so the deer aren't jumping over them. This is 5 feet because at the time when I bought these a while back, it was more than double the price to get the higher, just a foot higher. So I think now everything's come down a little bit since COVID and all that kind of stuff. So we have the weed barrier. Again, I'm going to reiterate one of the things I would change. So I'm try and bring to you guys what maybe I would do differently, good, bad, ugly, all that stuff. And I did try and do this star pattern with the weed barrier to save a couple bucks. If I could go back, I would probably just line the weed barrier up in a normal square or circle just for the coverage. Because what Mike and I found out is happening is that in these weeds, they are growing up so tall in these gaps and filling in. They're kind of drowning out some of our younger cuttings. Now in this specific spot, it's kind of grassy, and these type of weeds aren't really overcoming it. But if you saw just that last pine video where I showed you an example of the 10-footers, the weeds are 3, 4, 5 later in the summer. They're 5, 6 feet tall. So it's kind of crazy. And then that gives you a second job, or third or fourth or fifth, that you need to go back and either spray those or weed whip them. You don't want to drift spray to kill your cuttings, so just makes it more complicated, right? Then you're undoing the fencing, coming back into the pocket, redoing the fencing, just all this extra work. So if we could just cover the most of the space with the weed barrier, I would go ahead and do that. This particular pocket is really the only one that basically nothing made it. And it actually wasn't because of the ground or some of the things that you might think. It was simply because the netting came down the earliest. Mike, if you're able to show that netting behind you, if you guys remember, that's the netting that we started with at the beginning of last year. It was deer fence. It was at least 7 feet tall, so it did work okay. What I didn't really consider is that in some of the areas the weeds would get so bad that it would actually be pulling down and tearing that netting, and then other rodents or critters would be squeezing through the netting, and then deer would squeeze through and they would eat up things, or like you can see here, rub these completely dead, which happened in a few spots. So that was kind of a bummer. So in the center though, we're going to have 4 more tree-oriented type things. These are hybrid poplar and hybrid willow. You can see the new cuttings that we just put in right here. These are 2-footers on this hybrid willow and 6-footers on this hybrid poplar. And that's really just because in my mind, when I think of a pocket or kind of like an island of, shrubbery where the deer might bed and eat, I'm thinking maybe some taller stuff in the middle, some younger stuff with the silky willow and dappled willow, maybe silky dogwood, things like that out in the outskirts. And really a lot of those, like the dappled willow, basically will kind of trunk out into 3 branches at the bottom. So it'll really kind of, after 2 years, turn into this nice, pretty good sized shrub. And Tom and Seth over at Big Rock Trees have some great examples and videos of what they can look like in a short amount of time, which is one of the main differences of why we're doing this coupled with the pines, right? In addition to that, the deer aren't eating the pine, so this is also giving them a mixed food source, again, so we can stay away from that monoculture. We're going to have an amazing, diverse stuff going around in the fields here, which is awesome. The next thing I would say, if you did end up doing something like this with weed barrier, is what I did in this replanting of the smaller cuttings. We kind of just started to place these new cuttings in the middle of the weed barrier. So if you do start to get a little bit of overgrowth, whether it be on the outside of the pocket in or so on, I'm not getting quite as specific as far as putting it you know, a foot off of the edges to space them out. We do want them spaced, you know, 5-ish feet if possible. Those might be like a tad close. But as long as you're spaced out fairly well, it's going to work out okay. And when you have the cuttings too close to the edges, again, those weeds and stuff, if you're going to get tall weeds, they're going to overcrowd them and again, shade them out and stuff like that. So kind of keep that in mind. We're just doing 3 nice ones. We have some good, you know, shrubs on each leg, and we spaced them more just throughout the center so that they can utilize the weed barrier to the best of its ability. These 2-footers, guys, these are big. 12 inches are easy. It depends on kind of where you're going to be planting them. But in these types of areas where the soil is a little bit sandier, depth makes a difference. So therefore, we're trying to take these 2-footers and we're really trying to still get them about 18 inches into the ground. So these, I can give you an example here in a few minutes. I mean, they're 2-ish feet. So you can see they're only sticking up on the ground 5-6 inches. So they're in the ground quite a ways, which has allowed them to take up that moisture and hopefully live a lot longer than maybe a 12-inch cutting that's not as deep. And the depth is important, all right? If you take a 2-footer, you only have a little bit in the ground, you're not only not getting it too far into the ground, they're generally a little bit thicker, especially I believe those silky dogwood and stuff, which are over here. But they're a little bit thicker and they're just gonna tend to more dry out and stuff like that if you're not getting that depth. So super important. Tom and Seth do give you a little bit of a sheet to help you with your planting. It's very simple though. They're gonna cut a V, or not a V, but basically a slant at the bottom end, the one that goes in the ground, right? Makes sense. The top part will be flat, so that's pretty easy to tell. The other important factor that we need to consider is that the buds need to be facing up, right? So when they do get those roots in the ground and the nutrients flow up, the buds and the new growth is gonna be pointed upward. Otherwise, they're most likely, they're not gonna make it. Okay, so the way they cut the V, it's already gonna be the slant or V at the bottom, and the buds will be facing the right way. And pretty much in the package, they're all facing the same direction. So they do an amazing job of having those ready to go. You open it up, they're all the same way, get your holes drilled. And that kind of brings me to my other little thing. Just like the pines, we are utilizing the drill there. I don't need to show you guys, but a drill with the auger. You want to kind of just drill the depth you need for these cuttings. You don't want a bunch of air pockets. So drill in those 18 inches. Get that pocket all the way to the cutting all the way to the bottom, and then you're good. It can get some moisture, it can get sunlight, and we prevented the weed competition. In addition, guys, I wanted to show you real quick some of these poplars. You can see right here behind me. You can see 2 right there, a 3rd one in the back over there, and then there's 1 or 2 over there. Oh my gosh, don't fall. This is a little island of trees. If you remember me, I was actually showing you these hinge cuts. See all the sprouts coming off the trunk? How cool is that? Up and down the whole thing. Even some of the branches. Same thing here. You can see that. Not quite as many on these ends here, but I just find that to be super cool when you have some good hinges. And the premise for this island, not to go down a rabbit hole, was to kind of spread this out, get more vegetation, trees, shrubs growing, to just add to the bedding area and not have it be a field. It was just an easy way to kind of expand it, if you will. I digress. So these hybrid poplars that you see were basically stuck between, there it is here, stuck between some branches right here. So the deer are not going to want to easily walk, you know, right over this stuff. Now they can kind of step over that. You can see these big ones though, those branches are 4 or 5 feet high. Unless they are pressured, the deer are pressured by us, they are not going to want to go and just nibble on these and jump over them unless they're, again, starving or you know, you're in maybe the UP of Michigan and just kind of got to look at things. Here we've had still a fairly mild winter in southern Michigan, but when you have these leftover cuttings, these were 6-footers at the time, right? And those are 15 bucks a pop. And it's funny how some of the fencing and all the extra work I did with the weed barrier and the pockets, the netting came down, the deer messed some up or other animals, and these have not been fenced or tubed or anything. They were simply drilled and planted that way, and I've had great success. I see another small poplar actually back there behind those. 2 of them actually. Great success. I mean, it's got to be 90 or close to 100%. I had 5 or 6, and I already see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right here. So if that's the case, I mean, 100% success. As long as you kind of plant them in the right spots, the deer, because they're not, again, walking over them, and it's not right in their path to eat, they're not messing them up too bad. And the deer love this stuff. This like hybrid poplar in some of these, or the new shoots if you're doing some flush cuts on those. The deer love that new growth. They love to nibble on these. So the fact that those are still growing and looking pretty good, even with some of this competition, is fantastic. So if you have leftover cuttings, or maybe you're in the woods and you made a diversity pocket and it's getting sunlight and you want to find a way to diversify it or fill it in with some other stuff. Maybe you didn't have poplars there, but you were just cutting, you know, soft maple or blah, 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 some stump growers. Then perfect place. You drop some trees, you get some sunlight now, you can stick some of those additional cuttings in, and it'll help give you what you were looking for. So I thought I would mention that real quick. Lastly, kind of just as a refresher, I would say these 6-footers here that are in the ground, also those should be 18 to 24 inches into the ground. That is still enough for those 6-footers. And I would say we had our greatest success in all their other pockets. You can see some of the poplar and willow, that might be too far, but in these taller cuttings, because they could stay out of competition, still get down into the moisture and have a bunch of growth coming off of them. And you've seen the 10-footers that we have in 1 year over in that corner, which I thought was just super cool and amazing. And then if you do happen to get some 12-inch cuttings, they're of course the cheapest, so that helps a little bit. Those should still go in the ground around 9 inches or so, so keep that in mind. But basically, for the most part, you're putting these most of the way into the ground and leaving just a little bit kind of ready to go and start searching for sunlight up here on the surface. I think that is about it. I'll show you maybe a couple other videos or examples in the meantime. If you guys get questions though, let me know. We're gonna put welded wire around this here shortly, now that we're done with the new cuttings. But leave the questions below, I'll get to them, and I'll make sure I get them answered, and we'll see you guys next time.